welcome to our transnational recordings. In this recording we're going to dig a bit deeper, and we're still talking about the considerations of the deliverer, but we're specifically going to be exploring what does interculturality mean, because it's actually a very hard thing to achieve, and also what's the preparedness and transformative development required of you as the academic. So if we look at interculturality, you can see on this slide that it's actually four main components: teacher practice, program, pedagogy and students. And we're going to be talking about this in more detail. Have a particular look at the references underneath that diagram, because they also explore these four elements and more. But we can see that teacher practice is about adjustment, accommodation and premise reflection. So that's reflection on what are the premises or contextual factors that we bring to our work. In terms of the program, it's the transition of students coming into an environment that the epistemology of knowledge generation is quite different to the one that they have been used to. And then the pedagogy around what's the academic transition and mediating on pedagogic culture. So again, they differ across regions. And then from the students, what is their educational mobility and variable competencies that they bring with. And these are all elements of interculturality. You can read this definition by Kim, that it's based on relationships. So it's the mutual understanding and interaction between the people who belong to various cultural groups. And I draw your attention there that it goes beyond a mere tolerance of the other. So we've got to, as academics, work very hard to bring this mutual understanding and interactions to our classrooms. As I said earlier, interculturality is not an easy thing to achieve, but by including cultural intelligences into our work, it actually leads to new and enhanced forms of expression. And you can see here that we have three main categories, that it's complex because it actually moves us into a third place. So we're in a place that we're very familiar with, into an environment, and now we're expected to operate in an entirely different fashion. We're always thinking critically and engaging critically. It's not just about my own views and perspectives, but also what is the views of the others. And so this requires, not just on the academic, but also the student, heightened self-reflection and sensitivity towards others. And then again, we've got to look at the host country. What are the socio-cultural, political, legal and economic contexts that we're delivering into, and also that our students had vast experience. As I'm going through these slides, clearly I'm not going to spend all the time explaining every detail, because as academics that's not what we do. So we've gone to the effort of putting the reference on each slide, and at the reference list at the end you'll find the readings for that, which you can get from our library. So again, on the theme of interculturality, there's also three main categories: proximity, intercultural contact and intercultural learning and competence, which we've already alluded to. And we often think that intercultural learning is an automatic outcome and benefit of having a range of cultures together on campus. So even though we know that students, simply by being in class together, let alone other social activities they'll engage with, are coming into contact culturally, but that intercultural contact doesn't mean to say that they're automatically going to develop intercultural competence or learning. It takes a lot more than that. So you can go to LEASC in particular and read about that in more detail. Let's shift away from the students for a minute and look at your own preparedness. So in terms of your professional development, and participating in TNE is an important part of that, and we've also put up a resource on the blackboard of how it will help your promotion, that you're actually developing your intercultural competencies. You're now going to translate all these learnings into your pedagogy, your curriculum and student support. And then finally you're going to act. The cultural hegemony, and as cultural hegemony and cultural mediator and translator. What do we mean by cultural hegemony? Well, that's where the Western ways or ethnocentricity will take precedence over the non-Western ways. But to have heightened cultural intelligence, we know that the other is not other or different, that we incorporate it into our practice, and therefore we become a cultural mediator and translator to enable our students to richly engage with what we're delivering.
Again, we have a pause. In this Module 3, you've heard Marg talking about aspects of theory. Now we'd like you to reflect on the benefits of interculturality for TNE delivery. And we'd like you to list 3 challenges you might face in preparing for intercultural learning. And once again, bring these ideas and insights to the face-to-face workshop.
Let's consider our preparedness in a bit more detail. So the AVCC has very strict codes and guidelines for Australian universities that we're required to comply with, and Dunham Wallace and Gribble and Zagouras talk about this in detail. But obviously there's competent staff, cross-cultural training programs such as this. There's also induction programs to prepare you for your overseas teaching, and also that you're aware of your legal compliances in the parent and host country. And if you're going to be delivering overseas, you really need to be across all the compliance regulations. The delivery of transnational education impacts on academics both intellectually and emotionally, and Gribble and Zagouras and Dunham Wallace talk about 5 main features. So it's the intellectual impact, the emotional impact, the onshore experiences that you take to overseas locations, the academic relationships that you have with the host university that you're teaching into, and also your unmediated and mediated views and how they might impact on the cohorts that you're going to work with. So reflective practice is not directly supported within universities. It's assumed that as a high performing academic that you will have reflective practice as part of your natural practice. And there we're looking at the content of what course designs are, the process that we're putting into our design and delivery, and on what premises are we doing that. So are we culturally intelligent or taking it through an ethnocentric lens? And then when our perspectives transform into a broader and richer delivery and practice, you now see your role quite differently. And that's one of the advantages of doing TNE, is that you come out with a heightened view of who you are and what your practice is. But again, we draw your attention to Dunham, Wallace and Smith to look at that a bit more deeply. Looking at perspective transformation in a bit more detail, you've got to, and linking back to what we were saying about epistemology of knowledge generation, that students will come in seeing you as the expert and that you will deliver everything we need. And that's why often we have problems in getting students to engage with the reading lists, to go and use the resources in the Blackboard and whatever. So go to Smith in particular, the reference, and read up on this and look at reflecting on content. What do you perceive, think, feel and act upon in your delivery? And then think about how does that, is that similar or different to how students perceive, think and feel and act upon their studies? And that's part of the development of your own personal epistemology of knowledge generation. I've been talking at some length about epistemology of knowledge generation, but in actual fact it's a really critical part of the framework that underpins what we do. And as you can see on this slide, it talks about the assessment of our efficacy in performing. So efficacy is around success, and again it links back to previous discussion on perceiving, thinking and acting. So we talked about content reflection, but that then brings us to process reflection. How are we doing things? So that leads to our understandings of what time frames we're operating in, our social interactions we need to have, student-teacher relations, and then also are we culturally and with our communication acting in a synchronous manner or asynchronous, where there's quite significant differences. And it's in that last element of asynchrony that we find the risk that where our practice falls down or fails the students. And again, we direct you to Smith to have a closer look at that.
Now, Mark's been talking about epistemology of knowledge generation, so we'd like you to pause now and actually define your own epistemology, and also consider the epistemologies that your diverse cohorts of students may have, and then reflect on the similarities and differences between your expectations and how you manage, and the differences in your course design. Quite a lot to think about. We'd like you to wade through that and bring your ideas back to the face-to-face workshop.
And finally, in this last discussion on perspective transformation from you as the deliverer, we've been talking a bit, and hopefully you've had time now to read on Smith on premise reflection. You might even question, why is the university involved in transnational delivery? You may be ideologically opposed to it, and you're going to have to then think about that. And so with this deeper reflection where we think about why we perceive, think, feel, act as we do, that then leads to perspective transformation. And it's only after this deep reflection. Thanks a lot. There's actually quite a bit there for you to think about and engage with. And we really look forward to you bringing your ideas and insights into our face-to-face workshop.